Hey, it's Greg Ott here with MaritimeGardening.com, and today I'm going to talk about garlic, harvesting garlic, when to harvest it, how to tell when it's ready to be harvested, how to save it to be replanted, also how to save it just as a food thing. I'm going to try to do this quickly because it's going to rain at some point today. It's a beautiful, warm, mid-August Saturday morning in 2018. So last fall I planted about, about 100, maybe 120 heads of garlic. Probably going to plant more this year. Every year when I plant garlic I realize I've never planted enough to last me the whole year. I always end up buying garlic. Last year, despite having 100 heads of garlic, and I might have saved 25 heads for seed, so I had 75. I'd eaten them all by I'd eaten them all by January, the end of January, so that's not enough. So this year I planted 125 heads of garlic. Yeah, we'll see how that does. Probably need to plant 150 heads of garlic. So I've been harvesting garlic for a while. I mean, really, once your garlic scapes are done, you can start harvesting garlic, but there's more opportune times when the plant's at its peak. Right now my plants are at their peak. I just pulled this one out of the ground, and this is almost a 4-inch diameter, right? See my hand, right? My hand's over 4 inches wide, but that's a good size head of garlic, right? That's one of my better ones. They're not all like that, right? I got ones that are like this, right? Then I got ones that are about mid of the road, right? Right. So I got a variety, right? So after I've harvested all of them, what I like to do is, I've seen people braid them and do all that sorts of stuff, and if you live somewhere really dry, maybe you can get away with that. I've tried braiding them to hang, and what happens in that braid is that there's still moisture in that stem, and because it's humid where I live, you get mold and mildew and stuff like that growing on them. So I have found that I like to do this. This is people throw these things away all the time. They make fantastic sifters. That's a baby gate. It's an old piece of a baby gate. I mean, people throw away baby gates like they throw away toilet paper. It's just the most disposed of thing in North America, one of them anyway, because any garbage day you can find one. So they're great for stuff like this because they give airflow, right? And each garlic has its own little cell. And this is a good, I'd say 20 something pounds of garlic right here. So all I really do is I pull the garlic out of the ground, and I do it when it looks like this, looking kind of ratty. It's got this sort of, this lower part isn't green anymore. It's sort of brown gray, right? And maybe there is, there's a snail. Maybe there is a bit of green on the plant, but all the tips have this brown stuff on them, right? Like that. Right, so the whole thing just starts looking ratty. But you don't want to wait too long with that. I got one here. If you wait too long, wait till the plants, I could have probably waited a little bit longer on these plants. I got a little bit left. I got different places where I've planted them, and they all came in at different times and matured at different times. So all of these have been picked because the plants, I couldn't wait any longer. They had to come out of the ground. But these ones, which happen to be my biggest ones, still have the most green. All these other ones, I harvested them 2 days ago. I had to. I came out in the morning, and I knew it was going to be sunny, and it was a good day to dry them out. But if you wait too long, this is what the bulb looks like. It'll start breaking up. And it'll change the flavor, and it's just not as storable, right? This had stayed in the ground so long that it's breaking up and becoming a new garlic plant for next year, right? So I was a bit late with this one, right? I don't know why this one came along earlier than the others, it just did. Right? So there's no particular date. It's more like, what does a plant look like once the stem has no green at all? You're either too late or you better get them out right away. Right? As long as there's green, there's some photosynthesis, and there's the chance that it's still sending something here, and there's a chance that it's still getting a little bit bigger and a little bit better. But you wait too long and you get this, not this, and you want this. Right? Alright, so let me take you over to some of my plants and show you how I go about doing this. Okay, so here's my last garlic bed. And this was actually the first garlic I planted last year, and for whatever reason, and a lot of my garlic is the same variety. It's music, for those who are asking, music garlic. I've got some other varieties, basically just things I tried planting from the grocery store. And they're doing okay, but really nothing. All of that was, you buy some of those things because they're cheap and that sort of thing. Music garlic is a variety you buy from a seed provider. It costs a bit more to buy. But I have to say, I get the best results in this climate here where I am on the music garlic. In Zone 6A, I get the biggest, fattest. That big one I just showed you in the intro there was a music garlic. And I mean, you can tell how large a garlic's going to be from how big the stem is, right? This one here has this one I'm looking at right here, has I'd say the stem is almost ½ an inch in diameter at the base. I pull this out. It's a good size, like basically what you'd see in a grocery store, right? Maybe 2.5 inches, maybe even 3 inches in diameter. Look at it against my hand. Right? It's a good size. Very respectable garlic. Now here's one that the stem is notably, to my eye anyway, the stem is wider in diameter. Pull this guy out. And you can see, right, this one has a wider stem, it's got a bigger bulb, right? That's a nice garlic. Now, these are the ones, even though they look fantastic, these are the ones I put aside for seed. You want to eat the big ones, but really, if you want to get big garlic like this, you got to save your biggest garlic and replant them. Eat all your sort of mid-size, I mean, it's still a perfectly fine garlic for cooking and so on and so forth, right? But you eat all the pathetic ones. During the summer, I eat the most pathetic ones first. So I've been harvesting garlic ever since my garlic scapes were done. And I've just pulled the really wimpy, pathetic looking ones. And you work your way up to larger ones, right? Because the larger ones are the ones you want to keep. So this whole bed is ready to be pulled. You know, all the stalks are dying and they're gray, brown, that sort of, you know, gray, brown color at the base, right? They're ready to pull. Now today's not a good day because it's very overcast and I think it's going to rain. And what I like to do when I pull them is I pull them all out of the ground. And you know, the floor here, the walking paths in my garden's wood chips. I pull them all out of the ground and I clean them up a little bit. And I just clean them up by sort of swishing them through the bushes, swishing them in the grass, tall grasses, or even your lawn. I find it's just a really simple way to clean them. You can also just let all the dirt dry on them and then sort of dust them off the next day. There's different ways to do it, but I just find you swish them in the grass and they get nice and clean. It only takes a few seconds. It's like a nature's scrub brush, right? So I clean them off and then I lay them all out in my walking paths here in the garden and just leave them for the day in the sun. And then when I get a nice dry day, today is not, it's like 98% humidity right now. Not a good day for drying stuff out. And then after they've done that, I just snip the tops off, leave a little bit, and I rip this stuff off, right? And snip the top off and stick them on that baby gate thing. You could leave the tops on, but you know, these are wet. These are basically, it's like leaving a big piece of water attached to it, right? You want it to stop growing, and you want it to dry out and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, that's what I do. I'm sure there's different approaches to it, but that's what I do, and I replant them every year, and it works out fine. And it's just sort of over and done with, and it's quick and easy to do. And I take that baby gate thing and I stick it in my gardening shed where I've got my lawnmower and stuff like that, because it's got good airflow. It's dry. My little gardening shed's made of vinyl or plastic or something like that, so it doesn't have any mold or mildew or spores or anything like that, and there's airflow in it, right? I have a garage too, but it seems to be terrible airflow in my garage, whereas my shed seems to have it always has a nice sort of dry, fresh smell in there. So that's the sort of place you want to do it, right? And if you live in a state or a province where it's super dry all the time, you probably have more options than me. But I live here in the Maritimes near the ocean, and it's just always overcast and damp here. We might have the odd day where the humidity gets down to 40 or 50%, but for most of the summer it's a little bit higher. So you got to pick your day. So today's no good for these. All got to come out of the ground. Today's no good. I think tomorrow's supposed to be a nice dry sunny day, so I'm going to do it tomorrow morning. And to pull all these out of the ground probably take 5 minutes. Right? I harvested this many yesterday morning before I went to work. I get in my car and drive to work at 7:15 every morning, just like a lot of you do. But when stuff's got to happen in the garden, you just come out in the morning, you get it done. So I just pulled them out of the ground, threw them on the, I didn't even clean them that day. I pulled them out of the ground and threw them on the wood chips and went to work. And then when I came home last night, I sort of dusted them off, ripped the roots off the bottom, and snipped them and stuck them on that baby gate. That's all I did. Now, some people always ask me, do you have to pull the garlic scapes? Do you have to snip them? I can say from this garden, I left a number. You can see, I don't know if you can see back there, but a couple of these have the. I left the scape on. When the garlic flower forms those bulbs, you can plant those little things, but they really don't turn into much. It's really not worth your time letting them flower and go to seeds. I've done it. If you let it go to flower, and each one of those flowers makes a little teeny tiny looking garlic thing, which you can plant. And what will result from that is a little teeny tiny useless garlic plant. Right? You get a lot of greens, if you're trying to grow the greens. That's possibly useless, but possibly useful, but you're not going to get necessarily a big fat garlic. I've actually been saving one over here where I planted one in with my strawberries. Maybe I'll show you that later in this video if I can remember to do that, just to show you the result from doing that. It's really not worth your time. I would cut all the scapes off, cook them, make pesto out of them. I made a ton of pesto using my scapes. That seems to be one of the best, because if you're growing a lot of garlic, you're going to get a hell of a lot of scapes, and you can't possibly eat that much garlic scape, and you're going to get all your scapes in like a week or maybe 2. That's a lot of scapes if you got 120 garlic. So I have found when the scapes are full on, usually my perennial herbs are sort of they have a good height, so I just made I don't know, 3 liters of pesto. Right, but pesto stores well. You can put it in little mason jars, put it in the freezer, and just take it out as you need it. Right, so it's a great thing to do with the garlic scapes, and that way you get something out of all of that. But let's pull a couple plants that I left the scapes on, and I can show you what results from leaving the scapes on. Okay, so this is the garden where I have my biggest garlic, and there's a scape that stayed on, and I don't know if you can see, but there's one right there as well. Here, I'll just wave it around a bit. That's like almost 5 feet high, that scape. So let's pull that out and see what we got here. So here's one of those I left the scape on. Yeah, it's respectable, right? But certainly not a monster like the other ones. I find consistently the ones that the scapes are left on, that's what it looks like when you keep growing, consistently smaller than the ones where I nipped the scapes off. Now this one here actually has a fairly large base. Still not that big, right? So yeah, I would say in this garden, the plants where I cut the scapes off consistently outperform the plants that I left them on. So here's this is a hugelkultur bed. It was mulched with seaweed last year, and I grew only garlic here. I normally interplant my garlic in with other things, but this year I decided to plant all my garlic together just for organizational purposes. And here's some garlic that I let this get a scape, right? Let's this one get a scape. So let's, there's a snail on there. Anyway, let's pull the larger of the two, this one here perhaps. Right? Respectable sized garlic, not bad, right? Maybe 2 inches and change in diameter. Now right next to it I got some garlic here that I cut the scapes off. Pull all of them. They all got to come out anyway. There's all 3. scape removed, scape left on. I don't know if you can tell the difference, but the ones with the scape removed, they're all bigger. They're not twice the size, but they're all bigger than the one with the scape left on. And that's another question people will ask me. They'll say, I heard you can't just pull them out of the ground, that you have to dig them out. No, if you've got soft soil, you can just pull them out of the ground like I did. That's why it takes me no time to harvest this. I just come out here and pull them out of the ground. Pull them out of the ground, give them a shake, and then just sort of wipe them in the grass, wipe them off sort of thing to get them clean. Hey, really quickly, bonus footage really quickly while I still have some battery left. And I can actually see it. Here is a garlic that I planted from one of those seed head things. Let me just grab one of those, show you. So if you let the garlic grow and grow and grow, and you don't cut the garlic scape off, eventually you'll get a flower like this. And each one of those flowers will turn into what looks like a teeny tiny clove of garlic. And you can plant those. And I did that here as an experiment. This strawberry garden's a bit of a mess. I got big plans for this in the fall to sort of organize the space a little bit better. But anyway, you can only do so much in a given year. So here's one of the garlics that I planted from one of those little teeny tiny flower things. Let's see what we got, what the result was. So I got a teeny tiny garlic, right? So that's a reasonably respectable looking garlic, but it's I'd say it's got about 8 cloves, and it's about 1.5 inches in diameter. Right, so if I was in a survival situation, I needed a hell of a lot. I mean, there's probably 1,000 garlic on there, right? So 1,000 of these would add up, right? But in terms of like getting big garlic that are, you know, if you process garlic, and if you've been doing this as long as I have, processing, you know, to make a typical dish where I would use garlic, I'd want 4 of these entire things in it. And each one of these has 8 cloves. So that's a lot of tedious work, right? Sure, in terms of investment to return, right? Would make sense to plant 1,000 of these and I get 1,000 of these, which would add up, and it's free. But in terms of like the actual work you're going to have to put into turning this into food, the larger ones are easier to process. It's a lot easier just to do it that way. But you can do it this way, and you get something like this, or better or worse, right? You're not going to get those big 4 inches like I've got. You're not going to get those. I'll tell you that much. Hey, I forgot to mention that I'm going to do a follow-up video when it's time to decide which ones will be garlic for seed. So I put them in my shed, and I let them dry out for a good month in a sort of, you know, dark place with good airflow, that sort of thing. You know, dark place with good airflow. And then what I'll do is I'll take the biggest, best ones and put them aside for replanting, and the smaller ones, average to smaller ones, you know, there's a certain amount of garlic you need to have a certain yield the following year, so however many I need for that of the biggest, best ones, that's the ones I choose, and everything else is food. Once they're good and dry, I just put them in cardboard boxes, stick them in my shed. That's all I do, nothing too complicated. Alright, so I hope that helps to answer your questions for garlic. Pick a nice sunny day in the morning, pull them out of the ground, gently clean them off a little bit, stick them out somewhere where there's some wind and a bit of sun, just for one day to sort of dry them off a bit, and then cut them. And I mean, you could hang them somewhere if you got some traditional way of braiding them and so on, but you don't need to do that. You don't need to learn how to do that. You don't need to bother with it. And I have actually had sort of negative results with it because of the humidity here. So I find just cutting them off and sticking them in some sort of egg carton type thing, or what, you know, whatever, some sort of drying rack. I find a baby gate works really well. It's a really easy, simple way to do it. It takes no time, right? Like many of you, I've got a full-time job and I got a big garden, and a lot of this gardening channel is about how to swing that all, how to grow as much of your own food as you possibly can without working your fingers to the bone and making it too hard, right? Garlic's an easy thing to grow. Pulling these out of the ground is the first work I've done with these garlic since November. I haven't weeded this, I haven't watered it, I haven't fertilized it, I haven't tilled it, I haven't done nothing, right? I stuck these in the ground in November, and this is the only work I have done. 5 minutes to pull them out of the ground for a garden this size, and then you let the sun do the work to dry them, and then you spend about 5 minutes cutting them and sticking them in a thing. 15 minutes for 100 and something heads of garlic, right? I mean, that's per bed, so, you know, probably all in all, the entire garlic enterprise for the year, I invested about an hour into it to grow, you know, over 100 heads of garlic. That's of my time. Of course, it takes an entire, you know, the better part of a year, 9 months, give or take. It's a pretty easy thing to grow. I couldn't think of too many things that are easier to grow than garlic. And yeah, just again, for people saying you can't pull them out of the ground, of course you can. You can't pull them out of the ground if your soil's hard, if your soil's compacted. But if you use a heavy mulch like I do, and like all permaculture gardeners do, and how Back to Eden gardeners do, and how Ruth Stout gardeners do, and all that sort of stuff, no-till gardeners, you don't have to worry about all that. All the rules change. It changes the entire dynamic of a garden. This mulch that's over these garlic, it's this particular bed. I guess I should speak to mulches on garlic too. I find hay works really well. Sure, you get the odd weed with it, but it's really not that big a deal. If you put it on heavy enough, the weeds aren't that big a deal. So this was just spoiled hay from a stable, full of seeds, full of weed seeds. But you can tell looking at this garden, does it look overrun with weeds? No. There's the odd little thing. You might get a piece of grass here or there, a little bit of timothy. And you know, if you do see something like that, you just yank it out. But really, if you put it on heavy enough, you don't seem to get those problems. I put the hay a foot high last November when I planted these garlic. And then by the time spring rolled around, it had sort of worked itself down to maybe 4 inches, which was fine for the garlic to find their way through. And now that hay is maybe, oh geez, there's really only a couple inches of hay on there. It's really broken down. So all that hay has just been feeding the soil all this time, fertilizing it, keeping it moist, keeping the weeds down, making all the worms and organisms happy, right? That's easy gardening. That's the way to do it. All right, so I hope you found that helpful. Hope that helped you make your plans for growing garlic next year, right? Don't plant them till November, or it depends on where you are and how cold it is and how cold it gets. It changes, varies relative to your zone. I'm in zone 6A. I find early November is the right time to plant garlic here. Where you are, you have to figure that out. You know, if it's colder, you probably want to plant it a little earlier, and if it's hotter, you want to plant them a little later, right? And again, music garlic's the one I like to use. So I hope you found that useful and that helps you plan your garden for next year. And if something went wrong this year, I hope that helps you make sense of it. If you want big garlic, plant big garlic. Thanks for watching.